Okay, so today is the 7th of June, and we'll talk about Charles Rennie Mackintosh. It is his birthday. He was born in 1868 on the 7th of June. So Charles Rennie Mackintosh, born on the 7th of June, 1868, was a Scottish architect. He died in 1928, so he died when he was 60. Was a Scottish architect, designer, watercolorist, and artist. His artistic approach had much in common with European symbolism. His work, alongside that of his wife, Margaret MacDonald, was influential on European design movements such as Art Nouveau and Secessionism, and praised by great modernists such as Joseph Hoffman. Mackintosh was born in Glasgow and died in London. He's among the most important figures of modern style, British Art Nouveau style. Around 1892, Mackintosh met fellow artist Margaret MacDonald at the Glasgow School of Art. He and fellow student Herbert McNair, also an apprentice at Honeyman and Keppie, were introduced to Margaret and her sister Frances MacDonald by the head of the Glasgow School of Art. Who saw some similarities in their work. Margaret and Charles married on the 22nd of August 1900. The couple had no children. McNair and Frances also married the previous year. So here you have, 4 students, well, of the same school getting married, and Charles Mackintosh married Margaret MacDonald, a very interesting and important artist with an important influence on Charles Mackintosh. So the 4 of them formed a group, worked collaboratively, and came to be known as the 4, and were prominent figures in Glasgow style art and design. Mackintosh and Margaret married, setting up their first home in Main Street in Blythswood Hill, the street later being renamed as Blythswood Street, Glasgow. Anyway, these details are from Wikipedia, and I should have edited the text. Subsequently, they moved to South Park Avenue, close to Glasgow University. This was the man, Charles Mackintosh, and you can tell from his posture and his figure that he was an intense man, capable of introspection and insight. And yeah, without them, you cannot really say for sure that you can create significantly. Interesting, this flamboyant thing here, which replaces the present day tie. It's well, it's still the 19th century. Anyway, Charles Mackintosh, there I think I misspelled after C, it should have been a different letter. Margaret MacDonald, here they are. And she was very influential on his work, and they worked together. And it's possible that the influence coming from her made him, dedicate himself to art in his later years. Now, I just show some images from his work, like this pencil drawing, which I think is strikingly modern, considering when it was made. This is a drawing for a cathedral in Liverpool. He didn't win the competition, and maybe this had an effect on him in the sense that he, distanced himself from architecture. He didn't win it. This is also a perspectival drawing of the same work for the cathedral in Liverpool, a well-known chair by Charles Mackintosh, kind of a throne. He was an excellent designer, and his furniture pieces are still produced and highly valued. Of course, these chairs are sculptural, and you know, they are expressive, and maybe even symbolically they do say something. He was very creative, both in architecture and furniture design. Now, it is also true that at that time the craft was carefully, you know, respected, and the people who he worked with to produce these pieces of furniture were, you know, very knowledgeable about what they were doing, working with solid wood, and you know, this kind of craftsmen we don't have any longer, at least where we are. But who knows? Maybe craft will again reemerge. Another, you know, well-known, I could almost call it ceremonial chair. You know, it's a chair which, even without someone sitting on it, is, you know, imposant, and you know, it has a personality. It somehow has even a psychic content. You see here chairs, well-known chairs by Charles Mackintosh. You know, the functionalist would say they are, you know, rhetorical, they are flamboyant, they are probably uncomfortable. Why are they like this? Well, because I think life is not just about comfort and sitting comfortably on your butt. There is more to life. And indeed, Alvar Aalto was correct. Architecture belongs to culture, not to civilization. So the obsession with the prose of life belongs to civilization, not to culture. But then architecture belongs to culture. And I trust that Alvar Aalto was correct. Now, is culture in conflict with civilization? Sometimes I think it is, yes. So he created furniture designs, he created buildings, he manifested his creativity in various ways. Look at, this is a new piece done based on his designs, but is exquisitely done, as you can see. You know, this is a piece where every single detail matters. If you want to purchase a chair by Mackintosh, you can. They are still produced. It depends, you know, probably a genuine one from the 19th century is very expensive, but newer ones probably are affordable. I actually think an architect, and this is actually often the case, an architect can design anything. An architect can be an urban planner, an architect can do object design, and many architects actually practice all the activities that are related to architecture. And they belong essentially to kind of the same field. That's why, you know, we know furniture by Le Corbusier, we know urban studies by Le Corbusier, we know urban studies or suburban studies, although he hated suburbia, Frank Lloyd Wright. We know furniture designs by Frank Lloyd Wright. So an architect doesn't do just buildings. And the truth is, to design a chair is very challenging and very rewarding. It's almost like a therapeutic activity. I keep telling this to everybody, including to myself. Try to design a chair, and you'll see that little by little, if you are absorbed, you know, authentically into doing it, that little by little, something of your inner truth shows up in that design. The chair, somehow, if you can design a chair that is artistically endowed and aesthetically pleasant and also functional, you can see that you could feel accomplished to an extent that maybe sometimes even a much bigger, architectural entity like a building cannot give you. That's why Mies van der Rohe said that at least sometimes to design a chair is more difficult than a skyscraper. But it's very rewarding and indeed therapeutic. It's a good psychological, psychotherapeutical exercise to design a chair. And you can see he designed chairs. I mean, this is, compare this with the one on the right. Well, you cannot really compare them. I mean, obviously he was interested in form and, he was rather indifferent to, certain specifics of the function. But form is a function itself of life. And the relationship between function and form is complex. It's not as simplistic as people think that Louis Sullivan wanted to say when he said form follows function. Actually, he was misunderstood and misinterpreted because Sullivan, for example, created incredible ornaments. And so those who only think form follows function without knowing the complexity of the work of Louis Sullivan could mislead themselves. Again, the beauty has a function. John Ruskin was right. Strangely, perhaps, the most beautiful things in life are also the most useless. And he gave us an example, the peacock's tail and the lily. And it's true. What about the beautiful wings of a butterfly? What is their function, strictly speaking? Or why are they so alarmingly beautiful? If I am to use such a word, alarmingly. Anyway, again, the form is important. Ornament is important. Structure without ornament cannot be. And we only talk about structure. Structure and again structure. No one talks about ornament. Although in the present time, there are architects, many of them actually, who bring back the ornament to architecture. And Patrick Schumacher stated clearly when he said structure and ornament are one, should come together. And it's true, they should come together. Hello, Mr. Mackintosh, happy birthday to you today. And now this, I think, was done by his wife, Margaret MacDonald. And yes, they did work together and they created this, the Willow Tea Room. We are going to see it more in detail a little later on. Typical drawing, architectural drawing, interior design by Charles Mackintosh. The idea is this: even if you don't have clients, you can still create architecture. You can participate in competitions, you can make proposals for the city you are in, or the town or the village. You can propose a bench in a park, you can propose a building in the corner of the street, which doesn't have one or has one that is not very pleasing to you. You can be an initiator. In other words, don't expect clients to come to you always. No, you go towards them, you make proposals, you design a chair, you go with a chair to a manufacturer, or if you have a little bit of money, you manufacture it yourself. Be creative, express yourself as much as possible, have joy, because without joy, nothing good comes into being. Now, are these chairs joyous pieces of furniture? Maybe the one who sits on them is not very joyous. I don't know. But these chairs, you see, they have especially these two at the ends of the table. They are you know, symbolically, because of their height, you know, you could almost say this is a table for a family, you know, a rather a larger family, where you have the, you know, the father and the mother, you know, and then you know, the siblings, the children around, or something like this. So this kind of hierarchical chairs perhaps are not very fashionable today, but aesthetically speaking, these pieces of furniture do not leave us indifferent. And he didn't design just chairs, as you can see, he designed everything. In my opinion, to reduce life to utilitarian matters is not correct. It's not correct because if we study nature, we see so many examples. I just mentioned the tail of the peacock, you know, or the wings of the butterfly, and I can give countless examples. You know, I can mention the incredible flowers that spring up in the spring. Now, well, you know, why did God create that beauty? You know, what is the function of that beauty? You know, look at this complicated line here. Why was it made in this way? Why didn't he just trace two lines, you know, a vertical and the horizontal, but without the mysticism of Peter Mondrian? Creation is mysterious, you know. I create in a certain way, someone else creates in a different way. The idea is to find joy in what you do, to find that you actually express yourself through the work at hand. Now we'll look more in detail at this work, the Willow Tea Room in Glasgow, an important work which exists. The Willow Tea Room, it's an interior design, but it's exquisitely done, and they designed everything, him and his wife, you know, everything. I mean, I don't know if they designed even the, you know, the cups and the you know, the plates, probably not, but the furniture and whatever is on the walls, the room itself is the work of Charles Mackintosh and Margaret MacDonald. It was indeed at the end of the 19th century. There was this, you know, Art Nouveau spirit that required, you know, fluidities that perhaps we should reconsider. And actually, some people today do reconsider it. Now, the Queen's Cross Church in Glasgow, this is a lesser known work by Charles Mackintosh. It's, I think it's a fine building. And again, the adventure of designing, you know, going from the tea room to a chair to a church, it's a continuum here. It's the same adventure actually. And yes, architecture, the practice of architecture should be an adventure. If it's not an adventure, then it's could become boring and tedious. You know, it has to be an adventure because in an adventure you confront the unknown, and I think it's very, very important to be attracted by the unknown, to make steps towards the unknown. For example, the logo or the motto of SCI-Arc, the celebrated school in Los Angeles, architectural school, SCI-Arc, is to hell with regulations. We are going for the unknown. What about that? So to hell with regulations, we are going for the unknown. And I think it is the unknown that entices one. It is the unknown that provokes our imagination, provokes our creativity, our curiosity, our enthusiasm, and our exuberance. Not the known, the unknown. The unknown attracts. This is why all great architects brought something new into the world. They brought into the world the unknown that they discovered. And not just in architecture, of course, in any field, including science, yes. Oh, yes, this building doesn't seem to be too different from other buildings. It's true. Because, you know, it was still the 19th century. It was a church. The progress aesthetically or the changes aesthetically didn't take place, you know, very quickly. It took time. But in some works, I mean, even this church, well, affected as it is by the elements, does have, you know, for example, this part of this church, in my opinion, has a certain modernity and certainly something of the aesthetical language that Charles Mackintosh employed. It is affected by the elements, yes, because by the weather in Glasgow. Now another church, it's this one, the small one. This one is interesting, but again, it's a little bit unkept. Like if we look at this picture, maybe they cleaned it up in the meantime since this picture was taken. I would say that this building also, it's not so banal as it might appear at first. Cleaned up is looks more, you know, acceptable than here, but considering the humidity in Glasgow, I guess this picture tells more its truth than this one. You wouldn't say it's a church, would you? You know, it could be anything, actually. Well, it's a church. It's a church. And, you know, you look at the windows, especially at the top, you know, these are windows which one would find in a house, in a home, not necessarily in a church. Yes, this one on the left is a church, but this one, now the Liverpool Cathedral competition project, we already saw two drawings of it. He lost it, but it was a good project. Perhaps not so radical, not so innovative, but very skillfully done and very well presented, rendered. But he didn't win. So I guess this might have had an impact on his decision to give up architecture in his later years. It's possible. So this is the competition entry for the Liverpool Cathedral that Charles Mackintosh did and didn't win. I think he received the second prize. Now the Rennie Mackintosh, Charles Rennie Mackintosh 1898 International Exhibition Design. So this was, let's say if I count well, 11 years after Le Corbusier was born. Le Corbusier was born in 1887 and he did this in 1898. Now, Mackintosh's ideal house, designed in 1899, 1900, and never built. You see the drawing itself, it's almost modern. I mean, it's just this, you know, rarefied drawing with just a line. It's a project designed in a, I would say, I mean, this drawing, in my opinion, says goodbye to you know, the customs of his time. The Hill House in Helensburgh. So let's read a little bit about this. The National Trust for Scotland plans to build a huge transparent cage around the Charles Rennie Mackintosh designed hill house, whose sandstone structure is dissolving. The property was built as a home for the future by Mackintosh between 1902 and 1904, but his choice of the new material, Portland cement, for the render led to problems as it has allowed water to soak in from the day it was first applied. Well, you know, this exactly because certain creators, certain important creators love the new, they also sometimes innovate in dangerous ways. Leonardo da Vinci also used all kinds of innovations, and that's why, you know, for example, a famous fresco like the Last Supper is deteriorating under the eyes of anyone because he didn't employ the time verified techniques of the past. But this is very typical of the highly creative people. They want to innovate, and sometimes their innovations don't work. Like in this case, where Mackintosh employed this Portland cement, but you know, it became too soaked by water, and you know, from the day it was first applied. So, you know, Scotland was thinking to cover it with a carcass, you know, a transparent cage to protect it. It's a large building, and is it a house? It's closer to a castle, you know. But I like this ambiguous, you know, marriage between modernity and something medieval. You know, there is a certain medieval modernism in the work of Charles Mackintosh, which I think makes him very interesting. Designed in 1924 by Charles Rennie Mackintosh for the wealthy Glasgow businessman Walter Blackie. You know, I like the architecture of Charles Mackintosh exactly because of this unusual meeting between modernity and medievalism. You know, there are aspects of his architecture which are, you know, have a certain medievalism, you know, a little bit fortress-like. It's a romantic architecture. It's a romantic architecture, but also it's a simplified romanticism, you know, like you see in this elevation. And he took freedom with, you know, the placement of the windows and so on. And look at this, you know, vertical element here, which is maybe, I don't know what it is. It doesn't go all the way to the ground. Is it some kind of a chimney or, but it's clear again that form played a role, and he was not just concerned with function, but also with form. Now, a house for an art lover, this was built rather recently, I understood, or it was rebuilt. This is the project. Nice name or title, a house for an art lover. Although he gave up on architecture in his later years, he still built a lot, and we still didn't yet see his masterpiece, the Glasgow School of Art. We'll arrive at it. I would say his buildings work, they go well, they work well, they would accept easily the furniture that Charles Mackintosh designed. And this is a view from the inside of the building. So you see the aesthetics of the interior matches the aesthetics of the exterior. I love his chairs, you know, they might be uncomfortable to sit on, but who cares about that? You know, a little bit of pain in the name of beauty, I think it's okay. There are two rooms, a light one and a dark one. I don't know the story behind them, but I should. Very interesting architect and very interesting designer. And you see the There are, you know, almost insinuations of a human, you know, profile here is, you know, even though it is an abstract design, there are elements of inspiration coming from, you know, the human being, the human body. You see the head, the presence of the head in the chairs, as you see it here as well. You know, so there is some kind of I don't know how to call it, you know, an infusion I would hesitate to call it anthropocentric features, because it's not really about the centrism, but something coming from anthropos, something coming from the human being. So this is the drawing of what we already saw as being built. It's exquisite, you know, and you know, you know, in the name of efficiency, we divide the profession of the interior architect from the profession of the so-called architect, but they are both architects. And I have a hard time to imagine that, you know, Le Corbusier or Frank Lloyd Wright would have allowed, you know, someone else to design the interiors of their buildings. No, no, in fact, it is known that modern architecture found it extremely important to start your project from the inside out. So if you start your project from the inside out, obviously the interior of your building cannot be done by someone else. It's the work of the architect. There is a figurative art here because, you know, first, the times required it. Second, Margaret MacDonald was there near him, and she was the artist. She was an artist, although he was an artist too. They were together on these projects. Now we arrive at his masterpiece, probably his best well-known work, Glasgow School of Art. And indeed, it is a very important architectural work, and it is present in all the pages of all histories of architecture. It's a building which, unfortunately, I think twice was affected by fire and damaged severely, but it endured. And across the street, now there is a building by Stephen Hall. And what a beautiful honor to build a building across the street from this famous building by Charles Mackintosh. You are going to see that building as well. So this is a building dedicated to art, the Glasgow School of Art. You already see here signs of the fire that took place. I think I have also some images taken on the day when the firemen were trying to extinguish the fire. The building endured, but the beautiful library, I think, was affected, or I'm not sure if the library was too affected, but it was a big fire here. The library, which you look at now, is magnificent. It's not very large, but it is magnificent. It is like the chapel of learning or the small cathedral of learning. It's really, it uplifts you, you know, it's, everything was designed by them. And the space itself, you know, of course the books are important, but the space is important as well. And the furnitures contribute to this atmosphere of, you know, longing for the above in a way, longing for higher values, the values of spirit, the values of knowing. It's a very fine library that came down to us from the mind and heart and hands of Charles Mackintosh. It has character. It's like a large living room. It's a public living room in a way, which is conducive to study, to learn, to read. I love these windows or bow windows, by Charles Mackintosh. I mean, look at the monumentality of this building, and yeah, it's both old and new. It's very impressive, I think. The plan is, uneventful in a way. This plan didn't anticipate somehow such images. It's symmetrical. It's almost symmetrical. It's rather rigid and static, but what he made with this plan is very different. The sections, though, are something else, and these sections play a role in how Stephen Hall related his work to this building by Charles Mackintosh, which again is a very famous building, the Glasgow School of Art. I read that creativity is contagious, and I believe it is. Unfortunately, also indifference is contagious, and so we have to fight indifference with creativity. We should not allow indifference to become contagious. It's much better to have creativity be contagious than indifference. Indifference is the enemy of life. Elie Wiesel, who received the Nobel Prize for Peace, and he was born in Sighetul Marmației in Romania, he said that the opposite of love is not hate, is indifference. And the opposite of life is not death, is indifference. That's why we need enthusiasm. That's why we need exuberance. Here you see the building by Stephen Hall, and you see the fire, a recent fire on the building by Mackintosh, and here people contemplating the said event. I hope I have other pictures. Yeah, here it is. And this building twice was the victim of fire. But it moves me, this collective effort to save a building that matters. And I think we should make buildings, if we build, let's build in such a way that, in case, God forbid, a fire happens in the building we designed, the city, the town, the village, wherever we build, comes forward to save it with the same dedication and in essence, love, affection, because it matters. A good building in a city, in a town, in a village is an important entity. And that's why, this collective effort to save it in this case. They did a good job, but it was a big fire. Look at it. Charles Rennie Mackintosh, the Glasgow School of Art. How did the fire happen? Well, welcome to modernity. We have so many gadgets, so many outlets. We base everything we do on electricity, and God forbid, something like this could happen in anyone's building. Now, I'll show you some pictures with the right building at the Glasgow School of Art by Stephen Hall, because it's exactly across the street from the building by Charles Mackintosh, and it's in a way an homage to him. It relates to it in a beautiful way. Now you see, he didn't try to mimic, Stephen Hall didn't try to mimic, what Charles Mackintosh did. he came with his own building as he conceived it in the language that he's practicing in architecture, and the architectural language of his time. And I think he did a good job. Look here. Here is a section through the building by Mackintosh, and this is a section through the building by Stephen Hall. And you see continuously these arrows. You know, these arrows refer to connecting. The building by Stephen Hall connects not just with the building across the street by Mackintosh, but also with sun rays, with winds, with all these angles refer to a desire for communication. And indeed, as you know, the British writer Froster said, only connect. This is art, to connect. If we could connect, we are on our way towards art. It's not easy, it's true. But this is and I kept reminding myself of it, and also everybody else, the oldest etymological definition that I found of the word art is from the Proto-Indo-European language, which is prior to Sanskrit. Art equals bridge equals God. In other words, art is about connecting. It equals bridge, it's a bridge. And through extension is God, or art connects with God. So, you know, are we doing this sort of thing in our works? Let's hope so. You know, the complexity of the section of the building by Stephen Hall is clearly shown here. All these arrows, which show these are arrows of communication between the inside and the outside. Look, it's a very interesting section, and it shows clearly that he wanted to create a building that communicates, that breathes, that is porous. In this sketch that he did with his one hand with watercolors, this is the building by Charles Mackintosh. This is the building that he proposed and built. Structure, material, complementary, contrast, thin bone, steel, wood, thick skin, and stone. What else he writes here? So it's a continuous dialogue between, although he used a different architectural language, he relates himself dynamically, continuously to the building across the street by Charles Mackintosh. So again, here Charles Rennie Mackintosh, here Stephen Hall. He just won a competition for a building in a museum, of course, in I think in Prague. Anyway, he's still working very hard and very creatively at 74, besides being a father of 2 little children, 2 and 3, or 3 and 1, or something like this. So this is by Stephen Hall, and what we see here is Charles Mackintosh. It is a moving conjunction here, no? Because again, on the left side, Charles Mackintosh, on the right side, Stephen Hall, and you see the dialogue over the years between 2 architects, 2 very important architects. Bravo to both of them. This is how we continue on the spiral of time, with a dialogue between what we call the past, which in fact doesn't pass, because the relevant, meaningful so-called past is not really a past. It doesn't die, even attacked by fire. So it's not a past because it doesn't pass. And by the way of Stephen Hall, he was here on this Zoom platform 2 years ago on the 31st of May, when we paid homage to his friend Levi Suits, who died in 2012, and it was his birthday. So on the 31st of May, 2 years ago, I invited Stephen Hall and Wolf Prix and other people to participate on a Zoom presentation and discussion, and they did. I love the watercolors, the studies, the sketches of Stephen Hall. Look here, there are, again, there is continuously a dialogue with, with the summer light, or the summer solstice, with, all these angles that refer to the sunlight, the sun rays at various times during the year. These are attempts to connect. It's all about connecting with cosmic elements, with Mackintosh building across the street. And, it's also about materiality, because here you see notations about the various materials that he wanted to employ, and design strategies as well. He always does this. When he creates a new building, he makes such sketches animated by interventions of watercolor, and he does this with his own hand. So, he's very involved personally in the conceptualization, the emotional conceptualization of a project. And what do we see here? Again, these penetrations of light into the rooms, which again means communication, communicating with the outside, communicating with the building across the street. It's all about communication and connecting. He didn't mimic the building by Mackintosh. It's an original creation. A creation should be original, for God's sake. But there is, you can tell, there is a subtle relationing with it. It's not mimicking it. It's not trying to, create some kind of artificial symmetry. But you can tell that in a way, when I look at this section through the two buildings, I'm reminded of what I'm going to talk about tomorrow, Frank Lloyd Wright and Bryskov. The good thing today is that, if certain images entice you, or certain ideas that you might discover in the work, let's say now of Charles Rennie Mackintosh, you can continue the exploration on your own on the web, because I found these images on the web. You can find them too. You can study in depth whatever interests you. So these presentations are nothing but just attempting to, on one hand, yes, pay homage to important architects, on the other hand, to stir up the participants towards, increased curiosity and so on. Stephen Hall again. And these are the spaces created in the new building. Textile works, they are very important. I wish we had some textile, architecture is not just about drafting board. It's about many things, having workshops in metal, in wood, even ceramics or textiles and so on. It's a good building, the one by Stephen Hall. And here he is. Now that's Sherlock Holmes, possibly. I don't know, but Stephen Hall is on the left. Do you see the words there, sculpted by light? Beautiful. I think we should let light sculpt what we do, our building, if possible. Now I'll show you watercolors with flowers by Mackintosh, Charles Rennie Mackintosh. He drew many. They're not maybe artistically, from a pictorial sense, they are rather descriptive. They are decorative. They are very minutely drawn, designed, as you can see, but they are rather descriptive. They are designed in a way, designed flowers, but they are very beautiful, I would say. Some of them are more lyrical, some of them are more descriptive, but all show a genuine love for flowers. And I don't think too many architects paint flowers, unfortunately. I think we can learn a lot from flowers, from the fragility, from the temporal beauty. He was a very skillful architect and designer, Charles Mackintosh, but he also loved nature and loved to manifest that love through such exquisite drawings and prints, watercolors, and so on. I regret he didn't build a few more buildings, he could have. And I regret also he died rather, he could have lived longer. But he left something behind, an important legacy in various fields. And again, I admire him for painting, for drawing flowers. I do think we can learn a lot from flowers if we can make ourselves available to them, to study them, to feel them, to contemplate them. They are beautiful. If flowers are not beautiful, then what? Why did God exhaust himself, creating this ephemeral beauty? And now I will end this rather imperfect presentation, which is more like an introduction to his work. He deserves more, and maybe if I do this next year again, I will develop this presentation. I want to tell you that maybe my relation with Charles Mackintosh has a personal side to it because of this fact. When I was going through my middle life crisis, but I was always in my middle life crisis. But that in the United States, they say when you are 40, you are kind of going through the middle life crisis. I was very regressed and very depressed and very asocial. And one day I discovered when I was at the table in the kitchen, and with a pen, I began to draw something on a napkin. And I discovered I liked the way the napkin absorbed the ink of the pen. And I said, let me try some watercolors. And I began to paint actually flowers on napkins with watercolors. And I called this whole series Fragility at Power 3, because the medium was fragile, watercolor. Then the paper was fragile, was napkin, Scott family napkin. And then the subject matter was fragile, flowers. And you are going to see some pictures. I painted many, maybe close to 1,000. I was obsessed. I just painted flowers, and they saved my life psychologically, because again, I was at that time going through a terrible crisis. I was very repressed, regressed, and depressed. And here they are in Romanian. I used actually that little box of Aquarella Pionier aquarelle with flower. They are very different from the ones that Charles Mackintosh did, but maybe my sensitivity to Charles Mackintosh is also because of this, because I also kind of painted with watercolors flowers in my own way, And I have to tell you that the napkins are miraculous, extremely fragile, but also extremely strong. After all, they are made for dirty jobs, no, the napkins. And so I did. I only have these images, a few images, 10, 12, 15. But I know every day I was painting watercolors with flowers. Some look more like flowers, others a little bit less, but they were meant to be flowers. Yes, they really saved my life. And at the same time, I was reading Lao Tzu, the Tao of Life, a very beautiful little book that the great Chinese mystic Lao Tzu or Lao Tse wrote, where he says that what appears to be weak is actually very strong, like water. Water appears to be much weaker than the stone, but in time, water erodes even the biggest and the strongest rock. And it's true. So yes, there is power in what we call weakness or the weak. And this is the last image of this, again, imperfect presentation. Mackintosh deserves a better one. This is another watercolor I did on a Scott family napkin. Is of course, I was looking at a famous painting by Vincent van Gogh with the sunflowers, and that's what I made on a napkin with watercolors. Thank you. And happy birthday, Charles Mackintosh. Again,